Well, hello, everyone who's already in the room. This should be a fun day. The three of us have never been able to gather to have this conversation, so this should be cool. And I'm particularly excited about this because it actually came out. This whole event, this whole conversation, came out of like one encounter that we had at a Slalom event that kind of snowballed into this really interesting question, and I'm really glad that it got us to this point today. So let's do a quick round of introductions, and then I'll kind of introduce the topics, and hopefully we'll go from there. So I'll just go first. I'm Boris Jabes. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Census. We make a tool that allows anyone to access data inside their company so that you can connect from products like Snowflake and get access to all that really insight, all the data that people build in Snowflake, and make it available to people in Salesforce, in Marketo, in HubSpot, all the tools where people get their work done. This kind of like data infrastructure for running your go-to-market. And so we try to unlock all the value that is being generated inside data teams. Is kind of what we do. So Nicholas, why don't you go next?
Yeah, thanks, Boris. It's great to see you again. And was really fun to be at that event with you earlier when you came up with this AI autonomy framework originally. So my name is Nicholas. I'm a director in Slalom's NorCal DNA practice, data and analytics practice. And really what I focus on is leading our go-to-market efforts for data modernization, right? So these are a lot of the precursors for leveraging AI. And so I work very closely with some of our largest partners in data, such as Snowflake. So it's great to see you, Luke, and looking forward to the conversation.
Luke.
I'm Luke Ambrosetti. I'm a partner SE here at Snowflake. I cover the MarTech ad tech ecosystem, of which really both Slalom and Census are a part of, right? Jointly with our customers. Been here about 2 years. Came from the MarTech space myself, so yeah, excited to chat with you both today. A lot of exciting things to talk about today.
Yeah, I always find that, like, there's this, whether you call it convergence or parallel tracks, that they always intersect, of like data tech and MarTech are all kind of interconnected, right? And then there's a good reason why you are where you are now. And so I actually think people who work in MarTech should be just as interested in this topic as CDOs.
Oh,
all right. So what I guess I'll do is set the stage for people who weren't at that event. And so this is like your glimpse into what happened on a sunny afternoon in San Francisco a few months ago. And I'll preface this with, this was somewhat of an organic moment that we came up with these stages. And one of the things that I like to tell my team, and this was a very visceral moment when we were at this event, is, we work in San Francisco, we work in Silicon Valley, we serve amazing companies kind of all types, and so do the two of you. And I often have to remind my own team that the world is not as sophisticated as we think it is. And this is a good thing, right? This means you can make the world better. There's, some insert famous like Steve Jobs line about like, everything can be improved. It was just made by people like you. But what happens often in tech, especially when there's new stuff, and AI is like, the definition of new now, right? Is we get ahead of ourselves and don't know how to talk to different people who are maybe at different stages of learning the tech, using the tech. And we're often like already on, thinking what it could be in the future. It's like, well, let's assume all the cars are just driving themselves, and like, we don't need parking lots anymore, right? And so it's like, we tend to jump right to almost the next step, and everyone is still trying to like catch up and learn. And so this to me was like an interesting way of like, could we find ways to frame where each person is so that we can have useful conversations and useful advice to give. And so that's how we arrived at this framework, if I can call it a framework. And let me kind of quickly walk through what we did. And so we, everyone likes 5 stages. We have 5 fingers on our hands. And people already do this idea of stages of autonomy when it comes to vehicles. So it seemed like an interesting way to communicate like organizational awareness. And so, again, if you work in tech, you might be deep, deep, deep in this. Or if you're a student in high school already playing with ChatGPT, this might seem obvious. But organizations come in all shapes and sizes, right? So I think what we kind of said, let's level set, right? So level one is really like, are you aware? Is your organization aware? Do you use basic, available off-the-shelf public tools to automate some form of task? And I say this because, again, some people don't even get to use something like ChatGPT at work, right? Like, it's not available. And so that's kind of what I would call like a base level, level one. Are you using it to do basic, really basic things that LLMs are unbelievably good for? Summarize a presentation, or let me try coming up with 20 titles for my blog post, just give me ideas. And like these kinds of things where any LLM will do. The free tools are good enough, right? And your team, and I think the most valuable thing here is that your organization is learning to do these things. What I've often found in companies is that a single group or a single person gets very good at it, but the knowledge is not disseminated. The skills are not disseminated. The wisdom from using these things well is not disseminated. This is almost like saying, do you know how to use a spreadsheet, right? I think this is like level one. And then level two is where you start getting into like, are you using it in a workflow rather than just as a tool on the side? And so here, I think companies should be very careful before they jump into maybe like the later levels. And I think what we highlighted here is like, you should, the idea here for this level is very much that you're using it for somewhat non-critical flows. It's internal. It could be something like writing an internal doc, or internal support, right? So one of the ways we did this as we were going through these levels internally once upon a time at Census was, a search experience that was LLM powered, but for internal knowledge base, kind of situation. So this is good because you have easy oversight by your own team to make sure that it's not giving you completely wrong information, especially not to your customers. And then, and where this is like so important is like, LLMs are powerful tools, so they're dangerous tools, and so you have to kind of, I think, progress carefully along this journey. And so level three is where we see this idea of you are putting it in front of users that you have less, kind of direct relationship with, less control, less trust. So this is where you'd put it against a real data set potentially that is exposed to both internal or external consumers. Example might be like booking an appointment, helping with like sales demo requests and booking an appointment. And the reason this is a kind of a categorically different level is that things can kind of go wrong. You have to have developed some of the savvy of the first two stages to make sure you're not accidentally going to, book 48 meetings and not realize that there's some oversight you need to have on these kinds of tools. At some companies, by the way, you can jump right into the stage if it's low stakes. But at others, like that will really harm your customer relationship. So you should be more, careful. I did see a funny one just this week, right, where some company had deployed this kind of workflow, and the AI was a little bit boisterous, and it was proposing things that didn't exist, including like video demos of a product where there were no video demos. And so like these are places where you want to develop safely and progressively so that you get your bearings and you learn how to deploy this in a way that is not like slow, but more like in control, and what experiences your end users are going to get. And I think once you've mastered that, you can get into what I would call like the truly exciting, like rethinking of real flows. And I think this is where most companies would fail at this if they had not built up some of the skills up front. And this might be something mission critical, like drug discovery, but it might also be something mundane that you see jokes about on the internet, right? Of a price negotiation bot on your website, right? That's pretty core. That's a pretty core workflow for buying your products. And then the app might, the bot might literally go, yeah, you can buy it for $1. And then are you Are you dependent on that decision? Are you do you have to walk it back? I think Amazon's chatbots like box, you can actually have it write. You can actually have it write you like C++ code if you want to. Like it is really just very open, and so you should think very carefully once you put it into critical flows. And so to me, this is where you start learning about hardening the AI surface. Things like, what do you do about untrusted input? I think people are in my experience so far, people are very, very naive about this or lackadaisical about it, right? And it is amazing technology that can be easily like misused. And so we did this in databases, right? Once upon a time. Luke, you may or may not have had these scars, and Nicholas, you probably have, which is, once upon a time we used to put databases on the internet, and that was it. And then we didn't think about the fact that there was untrusted input on the internet, and we got an entire cottage industry of SQL injection problems, right? And like 10 plus years, 15, 20 years of like security flaws tied to the fact that we just put databases on the internet. It almost seems quaint now, but that took a long time in the industry to learn, to harden to like, oh, you're not supposed to put that on the internet, or you're supposed to check every input going into this thing. I think LLMs are very, very similar in that front. And so as an organization, if you're going to start deploying it in real flows where there's large scale customer usage, this is the kinds of things you have to learn. And it is not something you can do overnight. And finally, I think that the thing that we all aspire to is to literally rethink your products in an AI first way. And this is what I would think as like, the final stage, right? It's like you are, let's take a MarTech example, right? Luke, we'll probably get into this a little later. Like there's a difference between saying, help me write a really good query or segment, and like, help me think about, give me ideas for 10 segments I could write or create and then publish and advertise to you, and help me come up with like ads, versus just saying, increase my conversion rate and let an AI do anything, like literally generate copy, generate segments, generate ads, generate campaigns, generate follow-ups. That is a level of like autonomy that I think very few people play with at this point, which is fair because it is like, there's way too many unknowns right now. But I think that's the self-driving car kind of analogy here, where your product experience is kind of like intent first. It's like outcome first. And you let, whether it's called an agent tomorrow or something else, you let something autonomous try to make those decisions for you. I think we are still very far from that for most companies. And that's why most people are still in the like human review, co-pilot style stages of their products, even when they do deploy AI. So I'd say they're in stage 3 and 4. And really, when you go to the broad world, my contention is that like many people are at stage 1, maybe stage 2. And I think that's why I thought this conversation would be entertaining. So, Nicholas, we're gonna have your audio, I think, for a while here, but hopefully you can get your camera back.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Looks like it happened again.
It does. AV. I don't believe. So here's my first hot take of the day. I honestly don't believe AV will ever get solved. Like we could have AGI, but AV will still be a problem. That's my firm belief. Because my entire years in tech, it gets easier, but never foolproof. Like never perfect. Like that's it. I've had to unplug my camera and plug it back in again, maybe once a week. So there you go. Okay. So hopefully like this gives a bit of a stage. And what I wanted to do is send out a poll to the group and ask basically, where do you think you are? And this helps us like calibrate what we're going to talk about, but also I think one of the things we want to get into is like, and feel free to throw this in the chat, is maybe you disagree with the characterization, right? This framework is not like some ISO standard. It really is something that we thought was interesting based on the group that we first presented it to. And I think if you're like, wait, no, we're doing level 1 and 3 at the same time, or we're actually doing some number 5, this is actually useful for us to get into as a group. Okay, well, there you go. Ooh, this is very interesting. This is a little bit closer to the original prediction I had, that like more people at level 1 than I think people might realize. Okay, this is good. This is good. Well, all right. We'll I think that's the poll done. But okay, so it sounds like we're at like half the people are basically in the first stage of AI maturity, and I think this is not surprising, right? Many people, I think, are just using off-the-shelf tools. So I'm curious, like, Nicholas, you are probably the first in the flow of getting people from even 0 to 1, right? What's the, what do you see? What are the challenges in getting 0 to 1? Like,
yeah. Yeah, well, it is true that I think what we're seeing with our clients is that there's really not a single company out there. Like, we're not talking to anyone across the world who isn't asking us to have a conversation about AI, right? So I think from an awareness perspective, we're pretty much at 100% of companies out there are aware of it and that they should be doing something. Almost all of our conversations, especially outside of the tech sector, are at that kind of point of we really need to have a roadmap. We really need to understand how we can progress forward, right? But what we're seeing very consistently in pretty much all sectors is that it's both a tops down and bottoms up discussion, right? So, like the internet, there are many individual contributors or process owners in specific departments who have a lot of passion and insistence that AI can improve their processes, either reduce costs or make their go-to-market activities more effective or efficient or quick, or have a positive impact on their customers. There's also this tremendous amount of tops-down awareness, but where most of the clients are getting stuck is in the middle and bringing those two parties together. And I think one thing that's really interesting for us is you called out the internet, and I see so many parallels having lived through that age as well. But one of the things that's critically different is that we aren't going to make those SQL injection database on the internet mistakes this time around, right? I mean, that's part of the reason why Google sat on this technology for 10 years.
100%.
I kind of pushed them out the door, right?
Yep.
There is tremendous higher degree of conservatism in the world of IT and in the world of the tech sector who's building these products for customers. So I think that is slowing things down. And that's why we're kind of in this tussle between people who want to implement it and the powers that be in companies who really want to ensure that their roadmap is safe and good. And that they're not going to have a big problem by moving too quickly.
No, I remember, like, I had this conversation where I was talking very casually about kind of using, let's call it ChatGPT at the office, kind of like just the mundane things, the things I don't even think of as are interesting anymore. And then they told me that at their company, and this was a fairly, I guess, like conservative organization, it was like a bank type organization, they were not allowed to even go to that website. And because they were worried what people would copy paste into it. Yep. Like, and so I'm with you. I think it's actually, in a weird way, we're probably like, given the level of awareness in the world, like the fact that you're right, like every retiree and every school child knows about ChatGPT or AI at this point. It is amazing that let's call it the awareness at the global level of the concept. But then relative to that, I would say that organizational skill around this, like, remember on your resume, there was a world where you would say Excel was like a skill, right? Spreadsheet use was a skill. And then we used to think about, like, what does that actually mean? And like, do you know how to use VLOOKUP? Right? Like these were things that you had to like test on someone because it was like not obvious. Like the same way typing speed was something you have to like show off. I think here we're actually going slower than awareness. And I think it's because of these things. People don't know, like, is it safe to even use it this way? Like, is my customer data gonna leak or whatever? And people, I feel like there's a big fog of war there. Like Luke, like, is there constraints on how you get to use it, like, and how you help people on this front?
Absolutely, yeah, no, 100%. And let me first say that, fortunately and unfortunately, I am old enough to have experienced, the era of on-prem. My very first job was a nightmare. We actually went to DR in my first 3 months there. It was a nightmare, but also a great learning experience for me.
Yeah.
That's a different story. Anyways, absolutely. Right. So yeah, we actually, even at Snowflake, I have my own ChatGPT license. I mean, I would recommend anybody get a license
Yeah.
of, for their personal use. And while I might use it for work, it's like, very early on, we got the corporate training of, hey, we had quarterly security trainings at Snowflake.
Okay.
Like very early on, it was, hey, make sure you're not putting anything you shouldn't. Like, be smart about it, right? No production data. No, we don't really. I don't have access to production data. What's a better way to say this? No production code. No no real customer data, right? That goes in there.
Yep.
Right. That's a pretty blanket statement for anybody, right? So that's anything that is, hey, I'm getting on the VPN or secure access to, that should never go into ChatGPT, and that they wanted to warn us very, very early on. And I'm sure at this point, everybody on this call or everybody on this webinar has those corporate security trainings by now, right? We have.
But you laugh, but I'm not sure if we were to go look at a generic like corporate security video, one of the ones that people have to watch for.
Yeah.
I bet you it still mostly talks about phishing and passwords than
Oh,
this.
sure.
Right?
I mean, that's still a huge. That's still
of course, it's never going away.
Yeah, and like
if anything, it'll get better. It'll get more scary now.
Exactly. Right. No, it's yeah. But early on, we had that training. That's again. I still use it all the time, though. Right. I mean, I'm using it for knowledge. Right. Like to learn more about like other companies' histories, and I'm using it. I'm using it for just even like to help generate silly YAML files, right? To a certain degree. But yeah, it's again, you have to be very, very careful. We're providing some internal resources to it's like maybe this gets more into stage 2 of
I think this is exactly the transition point.
Right. I'm not going to go and ask ChatGPT what my company holidays are. It's not going to know that, right? And that's, to your point, it's something that's perfect for that stage 2.
Yep.
I will say from the stage 1 perspective, it's interesting to I think some people, to your point, they see what's possible with ChatGPT and like, oh, I should be able to do that with all of my business tools. And it's like, well, again, right back to that, hey, we all have to be very careful here. We all have to have that layer of trust and security going forward. And it's been nice and refreshing to see that for once, instead of just kind of jumping in head first.
Yeah. I think we had an even we are a smaller organization than Snowflake, but of course we take security like kind of quite seriously, and many of us used to run a security company before Census, so it helps. It's in the DNA. But one of the things we decided early on was like, okay, you can use these tools. The rule of thumb will be that if it trains on the data you paste in, then like that's not okay, right? But that's a hard thing for people to know at any given point. And so the stage after that we went through, our kind of transition from 1 to 2 was a little bit of like, why don't we just get a site license for something that we can know the policy of, right? And so I think that's where people go from, we had everyone have their own personal license to whatever they wanted. They could expense it and all that stuff. And then we're like, okay, we now know that if you buy the enterprise version of insert your favorite one, right? Like it could be ChatGPT, it could be Claude, whatever. They provide those guarantees. And then you can just be like, okay, I'm just going to give this access freely to the company. That way people don't have to think about that policy, right? And that was kind of us transitioning a little bit towards like, there is an org, there is a set of people who think about offering this to the rest of the company because it's too much. I think that there's high like mental overhead to figuring out, is this an okay use case? Is this not an okay use case? Is this the perfect tool? Is this an allowed tool? Is it not an allowed tool? Right. And that's when we started, I think, down the journey of like, okay, we will turn on these features. We will get these off the shelf solutions that you can use internally. And exactly around company knowledge base stuff was like exactly where we started. Right. Have either of you found that like where do you see Because I think, Luke, you just basically described, I think level one for most people is like, it's better Google, you know, it's like these kinds of, it's a little like mental helper for your day-to-day life as a personal productivity. But like 2 starts getting into workflows, and workflows involve other people. And where have you seen people be, you know, successful at getting these kinds of things going? Like, and I think we had like what, 30%, 25% people saying like, hey, I'm in that stage. So it feels like that's the place where people are like, show me how I can provide this, like show this, like this proof that we can improve workflows, right? Where are the good ones to get going?
Well, I can tell you that, yeah, that survey doesn't surprise me. It really falls in line with what we're seeing from our clients. I primarily work with tech sector clients here in NorCal, and I think what we're seeing is, you know, not surprisingly, tech sector clients are moving faster to get to stage 2. I think there's 2 things that drive that. First is just literacy in a particular area, right? So when you have line managers, process owners in engineering or in marketing or in sales who really are close to the data, close to their processes, and they understand what good and bad look like, you seem to get to departmental solutions with AI a lot faster because they're confident that they can, you know, with a person in the middle approach, intervene in any hallucinations that might come up, right? So a couple examples that we're seeing and we have seen really develop well over the last 18 months is code reviews and initial code development in engineering teams. And
okay,
yeah, this is not a surprise because I think for engineers who are tech savvy, they were some of the first people to jump on ChatGPT and start playing around with it. And they did it with their own email addresses offline. And they did it with, you know, open source Python or SQL or C code that they are already using in their jobs. And so, you know, it immediately went to the discussion of, well, how do we bring this in-house, right? And they kind of immediately jumped into that, like, how do we actually operationalize this safely? And what we've seen is that there is now, like a year in, really, quite a number of engineering teams are having their more senior people enabled with AI bots that will help them. You know, Microsoft Copilot is an example, but that's not the only one out there. And many companies have already gotten to the point where they've internalized them. They've signed off on the privacy and security, and their data is mature enough that they can actually use it successfully. Their code base is already in Git, for example, so it's pretty easy to be able to import that into their own LLM environment and start to use it. So yeah, that's one area. Marketing is another. We're definitely seeing a lot of. We're seeing an expectation that you can move faster to prototype messaging with LLMs, right? So it's definitely internal, and again, it requires that kind of person in the middle who's more senior, who really understand what good looks like to identify issues. So those are the 2 areas I would say that we've really consistently seen.
You know, we used to talk about this. I'm sure both of you have had this conversation with companies all over. This idea of I used to have this debate a lot with people of like, what should be the organizational structure of a data team, you know, where it's like, should it all be centralized and they do all the analysis for everyone? Or do you like send in, you know, like, do you have scouts in every org, like so that the marketing team can have their data analyst and the sales team can have their data analyst? I wonder if there's something similar here around like, at this stage, you should have like an AI lieutenant in various places to be like the kind of, listen, I know how to do this really, really well, and I'll help like productionize it in this org. And it doesn't surprise me that engineer orgs are the ones using it. They're the most tech savvy already. And like you said, they can evaluate that it's doing a good job. And Git is like rewind, right? Don't forget, Git also gives you rewind for free. Like you can undo mistakes, which is a lot harder in a lot of other spaces in the company.
Yeah. So it's another example of organizations that had really good processes in place, really clean data. And again, engineering is all over the place. Many engineering teams, especially in smaller companies or in non-tech sector companies where the engineering is not the product team, you know, they're support business. They may not have good DevOps processes. They may not be using Git, right? So, for example, in our world, migration of DevOps processes onto Git, especially for like just core SQL things that have historically not maybe been managed well, very there's a huge uptick in the desire to accelerate those projects and get that done, because everyone realizes that we can't really start to explore Copilot style AI tools until we actually have our code really managed well.
This is, again, I find this amazing and hilarious. Like, it's if you told an average engineer in Silicon Valley, like, PS, there's code out in the world that is not version controlled, they will not believe you, right? But lo and behold, of course, there's code that's not version controlled. And it's a really interesting point that, like, maybe a good aspect of getting good at level 2, going towards level 3 is that, like, you actually have those kinds of processes in place. Like, the ability to collaborate across people is always better when there's, like, some form of artifact that you can conversion, right, and comment on. And it's a really interesting question of, like, maybe AI will accelerate the adoption of products like Git, like, like the genre. Luke, you said HR. You guys, like, was that a stage? Was there a moment where it's like, now there's an HR bot at Snowflake? What's the deal?
Sure. HR, I think I was actually doing one for travel and expense today. That one's actually not very good yet, if I'm being quite honest. Had some frustrations with that this morning.
Yeah.
The internal IT bot has been great, right? Actually, it's been very, very good.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
That one's actually been good. I will say, like, as someone who consumes a lot of product marketing material, unfortunately, folks are using AI for. I mean, I get it though too, right? It's a great tool, but it's almost made it worse in the sense that it's made things more confusing for customers.
Yeah,
folks are starting to use AI to write their product marketing material, but again, I think almost everyone's doing it, so it's like we're all at fault here, right? Overall, but back to the point though, it's like you have to have. And this is what Snowflake stresses a lot. You have to have the right data foundation, right? It's funny. It'd be funny to try and see companies go, especially when it comes to HR or even IT stuff, go from not having or having really poor documentation on these processes to just like, oh, we can try and have AI do it. It's like, well, what's the AI going to do here for you?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's think at all levels here. You gotta have a great data foundation. To feed AI, to feed AI. And I think at this stage, starting at level 2, probably kind of blurring to level 3, you have to actually, in my opinion, here have to really be careful of your SaaS contracts and not to offend you.
Okay, let's go. I want controversy, including on me.
Yeah, well, this is partly where it's like you have to become very, very careful about what the SaaS is using for their LLM for AI. And if you're okay with that data that you're giving it, and what they're using it for, and what that agreement is, I'm sure. I don't know if folks have a lot of companies out there, a lot of technology vendors out there are asking, their customers to sign addendums for OpenAI, or ChatGPT usage, right, on behalf of them, right, not ChatGPT. But I think at some point, right, especially as you go into level 3, right, that's probably starting in some places.
I think that's right. I agree with you. It's like right at that margin as
you have to. At some point, that's not going to be okay, right, for many organizations, right, to give that, to hand that over and say yes, this is this type of data can go in there. Yeah. So this is where it's like, and my main point here being is first be careful about SaaS, but at the end of the day, as you get to more production scale workflows that are happening, the AI is probably not happening in the SaaS platform. It's going to be happening where the data layer is. Right? It's kind of my core is it's happening at the data layer. It's likely not going to be happening at the SaaS layer for many brands in the future.
I mean, I think we'll you and I can have a whole other conversation about data layer versus app layer someday. There's lots to be discussed.
Absolutely.
But I'm with you that, like, my caveat would be this, which is 1 and 2. I think if your company is like, what we need to do is build our own, like, fine-tuned local LLM, I think you're doing something wrong at those stages. Yeah. Like, you have not mastered the technology, the concepts. I would say 1 and 2, you absolutely should use, like, whether you can combine, you can pipeline these things, but I would use off-the-shelf things. And I'm with you that in level 3 is when you should start to be, like, potentially experimentation, but like start looking at what can I do directly on my data? What can I do? Like when you connect to real data sets is like the whole point of connecting it to data sets is like you're effectively going to have to start learning. I think you're going to start putting people who do product thinking, engineers, etc. That's when they start to really be involved, right? So it's like, hey, you might want to learn about knowledge graphs and RAG and fine tuning and all these things. And by the way, some of those things will be dead ends for those processes in your business, and that's okay. Like, I think the nice part about 1 and 2 is you've gotten a bit of the wins. Now you can afford to experiment, and I think 3 is like, it's almost like in the capital allocator mindset for me is like, this is where you should let like things fail too. It's your goal here is to get a lot more knowledgeable about how to productionize this stuff. And I'm even curious, like, you know, Luke, you said like, you know, the travel one's not great yet, right? I'd love to know, like, but the IT one is good. Was it good on day one? Like, what is the, like, it'd be a really interesting piece of, I'm sure, I'm curious if either of you have seen this, where it's like, what is when people say, if you met a CIO or CDO and he's like, we're shipping, you know, this quarter. And you're like, oh, when did you start? And be like, we're starting this quarter. Like, you wouldn't believe him, right? You'd be like, you don't know the unknowns yet, right? Like, yeah.
And then maybe I should specify, you know, not to pound our own chest here, but the travel one's actually from a vendor, from a travel like
sure.
Whereas the IT one actually was, from what I understand, custom built by our IR team, right? You do an amazing job. So again, a lot of that is that they already had a lot of data and things to work with, and I think that helped. But yeah, the one I did have a great time with this morning was a SaaS vendor or a external vendor.
Listen, my co-founder loves to tell me that now he's done customer chatbots, which I think is like, you know, level 3 is very much like public facing chatbots, right? He's now hitting the like 0, you know, get me to a real human, just like on the phone, to like bypass the kind of AI flow, right? Yeah. So people are developing these skills. It's like, just like in the phone tree, operator, which is a real thing though, right? It's like, you could be under the illusion that like this is helping you and it could hurt in some other ways. Yeah. Nicholas, are people outsourcing when they say, I really want to do this now? When they go, I want my support flow on my website to be a chatbot. Like, are they building that themselves? Is this something they're going like, no, tell me what to buy or like who to develop it and it's outside? Like, how are companies doing this?
Yeah, well, this is a huge driver for a growth of professional services, tech services for sure. So Slalom, Accenture, Deloitte, we're all seeing big uptick in interest, not just to, you know, build a roadmap, but to build pilots and to deliver solutions to the business. So yes, it's good for us in the business that we're in, but it's, you know, what we're seeing is very much aligned to how IT works overall, which is that they're going to be savvy about how they outsource, and they're not going to want to lot, stock, and barrel outsource. So a couple of big trends that we're seeing is that as you're shifting between stage 2 and stage 3, there is, again, much more maturity on the part of security and privacy teams within companies who are very insistent on things like having their own LLM stack, for example. So there's, you know,
Nicholas, where is that coming from? Is that coming from IT leadership kind of control, or is it coming from like nerds want to play with it at the company?
No, it's coming from IT leadership. It's coming from, you know, a real conservative desire to ensure that the data set that is being used is controllable, right?
Gotcha.
So there's 2 parts to that. The first part is, how do you ensure that you reduce hallucinations? And Snowflake actually has a great demo that they're doing now as part of their Cortex offering, where they talk about how you would bring in data sources and they're not complete enough, and you start to get some hallucinations. Like I think the demo is, you know, a bunch of different, you know, write-ups on what different stores in a retail food business would have, and sure, the LLM started to hallucinate store locations that didn't exist. And then going back and identifying root cause before you move on. Why, right? And ultimately, the why is because the data sets for store locations were not married to the geolocation data effectively enough, and going back and creating that orthogonality within your core data sets that are being leveraged by the LLM fixes the problem. And like that, we're seeing that across the board. Like this move from stage 2 to stage 3 is all about really fine tuning how you're pulling in your own data. And again, you can do that with off-the-shelf LLMs, and OpenAI has been great at partnering with companies. They have new enterprise offerings that are geared for this. But what we're seeing is that larger companies with more complex data, companies that want to pull data in from multiple ERP packages, for example, they really want to take the time to stand up their own proprietary LLM that's going to be based on OpenAI, but maybe also based on Lambda. And they want to certify that. And then they also want to certify all the data that it has access to across their business. And again, if this moves slowly, oftentimes it does, right? And what we're seeing is that there's bureaucracy, there is poor data to begin with. But I do want to point out that we already have some clients that are well in stage 4. And the reason for that is because they've been able to identify key business processes, many times customer facing, where data is clean and it's demonstrably clean, and you can understand the lineage, and it's also a closed set, right? So it's very simple. So
I think the closed set is like a huge advantage in those situations, right?
Yeah. One of our clients, Norwegian cruise lines, they were very quick to have a customer recommendation engine. And the reason they were able to do that quickly is because A, they have really good DevOps and experimentation already established within their engineering team. And B, they were able to identify a data set that was concise, bounded, and clean and safe to leverage with confidence.
I feel like one of the problems here, if I were to guess, and you guys tell me if I'm off here, is that like I always, I'm still a bit of I know I'm technically the man at my company, but like I still feel like a bit of the maverick here and there, and when I hear these approaches are driven by the top, I'm always like a little bit concerned that this is just a way to slow things down way more than you should, and you'll lose agility. But you make some I think really good points, and I'm trying to think about how can you help the top not go too slow, but still have these things, and I would guess this idea of a closed set is very hard for people to communicate to their management that this is going to be safe because it's a closed set. And I'll give you. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry. I've been getting an echo from myself. This is hilarious. I'll give you one example. You mentioned the Norwegian cruise lines, but I spoke to one of those let's call it Fortune 50 or whatever, entertainment companies, I'll say. And they have deployed some of this tech and they're very happy, right? And it's really just about customer questions. It's really just a chatbot for answering questions about their services. And at their scale, just tremendous results, right? And then I told them, so are you going to do this next? And no. And I said, why not? And it's that has liability tied to the American Disabilities Act. It had something to do with this could answer incorrectly about where you could use your wheelchair, and they're the lawyers have basically said hard no on any form of non-human response. And the funny thing is, they could not explain to their lawyers that this cannot answer from outside this set. The lawyers just don't buy that or don't have a framework by which they can have this conversation. You cannot tell them dude, it will never answer something false because it can only answer from this battery of 10 answers. But how do you prove that? How do you complain? And so I think this is where, wow, they had potentially millions of dollars of savings they could have had, right, on just that. And they can't deploy it. And the Lord, and I was fascinated. And so I feel there's still a language missing at this stage as you go from 3 to 4, kind of how do I help the overseers understand that this is in the category of safe? And I reckon most companies are just going to be they won't be able to convince them, and only the chief product officer, chief technology officer, who will maybe supersede them, will be able to drive this. Because otherwise, I think it's probably really, really hard for a mid-level team who's I think we can build this to convince. I worry that people are going to go very slowly on these ones because of that.
Luke, what are you seeing?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you scale though, from 3 to 4, right? As I think about scaling, it's going to get harder, right? It's obviously, but because you're naturally a lot of times, maybe not in every time, as you're talking about here with that specific use case, but you're expanding what those sets of data are, right? And you're going to also, what's the best way I want to say this, or what's the way I'm trying to say this? The percent accuracy, it's where's the risk and the percent accuracy, right? And where are the levels of those, and what are you comfortable with, right? And because for a legal use case, it's going to maybe take up, or with its, when I say legal use case, I mean legal constraints. Given legal constraints, it's going to take a lot longer to make that jump than it would, than it would for something that doesn't have legal constraint to it. And so that's what I'm seeing a lot is what, how comfortable are you? Because I think, back to the grand scheme of things, I think 3 and 4 is realistically, like Boris did this earlier, where companies should be aiming for today, right?
100%.
3 to me is, you can even include classic machine learning in 3,
Yep.
right? As a big part of 3, and even into 4. And then 4 is like really that's what you should be reaching for today as like the idealistic goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think 4 is where you should at least have some people thinking that you should be able to afford to have them thinking about 4.
But that's the timing it takes to get to 4. Again, it's all about the risk. It's about the accuracy, and the accuracy it's always going to get better over time, right?
Yeah.
As some folks are not, especially we talked, I think earlier, right before we started the conversation about specific industries being a bit more risk tolerant than others, right? It's going to be a huge factor in that jump for those levels.
Yeah. I wonder if like what companies need at this stage is, I hadn't thought about it until just now, is a terminology, like a shortcuts to talk about the risk and or the lack of, right? I think when we talked about this a few months ago, the 3 of us, I was like very much on again, my old security brain, SQL injection brain is like, untrusted input is like a huge problem, right? Which won't apply in your, let's call it life sciences drug discovery like scenario, but 100% like will apply as soon as you open this up to the internet, right? And so many tech companies learn this, there's famous versions of this with like user generated content, right? Like if you have an app of any kind, Pinterest, you name it, TikTok, whatever, any of these apps that allow users to upload stuff, eventually they will be using it for, illegal content, right? And so like all those products eventually have a fraud detection team. Like that's a necessary component. If you don't think you will have it, you will have it, right? If you have a marketplace and there's a rake, there will eventually be money laundering attempted on your marketplace because again, your rake is less than the, government rake for money laundering. So people will attempt it. There's all these like things that are guaranteed to occur once you open it up to the internet. And I think risk is really hard to model and both to communicate about internally. And I think my vibe is like for you to succeed at 4 it's like you have to buy, like you need both of these skills to develop, right? You have to have the skill to build these capabilities. Like you got to know how to forget that your data is clean, that you've done all the work to build a semantic model of your data that you can use in an AI tool. Like that's good. That's hard. That's going to take time. And that you know how to like create a user experience that is appealing, but in parallel, you're going to have to develop this skill, right? This modeling of risk and helping your org realize that there's like some guarantees you can make. I think this is like really, really hard at 4. And right now it's just happening it's the Wild West right now. And I don't think traditional companies are able to deliver on 4 really, because unless for big internal tools.
I would say too, it's like, probably arguments about like how, with a specific topic, whether it is a 3 or whether it is truly a 4.
Sure.
I was pseudo debating somebody the other day about bringing back up MarTech, like SQL generation for marketers, right? My belief, just to give one specific thing, my belief is that those drag and drop editors that you see will die out, and that folks will be able to do text to SQL in a very accurate way here very, very soon. Other folks say, no, that's not feasible. That's still too far out, right? And I don't think so. I think you can make it, very, very feasible on top of your own data. But so again, there's probably the debate that folks are going to have with different use cases. Hey, like what is really, and how can we truly measure the risk here, and govern the way that we need to and want to.
Yeah, I think you could, if you were to blur, zoom way out and reduce levels of detail on this chart. To me, there's productivity improvements, either personal or group, and then there's changes to the way you deliver your services altogether. Like that's the journey, right? It's like there's no question that we're all going to go on a productivity journey the same way the computer helped us and Excel helped us. That's like, and we're only still, I think, scratching the surface, which is the fun part. Like I think there's still so much more. Like most people haven't learned VLOOKUP, in their spreadsheet.
It's XLOOKUP now, by the way, Boris.
Right, it's XLOOKUP.
That's the new hotness.
Sorry, I'm an old man. Yes, it's XLOOKUP now. They've merged HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP into like a unified API, right? A unified formula. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just messing with you.
It's good. It's XLOOKUP now. Yeah. All right, everybody. XLOOKUP. But the delivering your services this way, like there's that meme, right? That I think OpenAI threw out. There's going to be $1 billion one-person company, right? And it's because like that person is going to attempt to deliver the entire software experience in this way, right? And I don't know where we're like. I think level 5 is the fun part. Is like it's like still completely open to speculation as to whether this will succeed, because some of that is like guessing where the puck is going of like how good these models are going to get, right?
I think also as we move from 4 to 5, and just even at 4, the thing that we also should really think about is how the industry is going to develop, right? So, there's tremendous, last year we saw this big uptick in lots of companies like Palantir stock just going through the roof. And then more recently, people have slowed down and they've been like, oh, this is going to be harder and it's going to take longer than we thought. And fundamentally, a lot of companies are beginning to realize that to actually get to the 4 or 5 level stage, for liability reasons, they don't want to be the first, right? And so this really opens the door for companies to innovate and provide services, right? And, all of our partners are working, Salesforce and ServiceNow in particular, you talk about the app layer, are innovating up the wazoo right now to improve their platforms by introducing embedded AI features. And so I think in the future, what we're going to see is a whole, burgeoning of enterprise application companies that have the advertised ability and hopefully eventually proven ability to completely come in and change a workflow, a customer workflow or an employee workflow. And they're going to charge a premium for that, but they're going to get you there quickly. So Canva comes to mind as a company that has probably been one of the first movers in the world of imaging, right?
Yep.
Also in the world of just marketing automation from AI, and companies are already signing up to be Canva customers to take advantage of that.
Yep.
And they're putting reliance in a company like that through their licensing agreements to protect them, right, and to guarantee outcomes. So I think we're going to see more of that. I think that's where the innovation cycle for new companies is going to help more traditional companies move faster.
Yeah, no, I mean, my favorite thing about all these things, of course, is always everything we just described almost like naturally results in new companies have an advantage because they carry less of the risk profile, right? And that's a wonderful thing. This is the story of our economy, so that's always good. Well, okay, let me leave with 2 questions. Like let's there were 2 questions I think we wanted to have, and if someone on the chat wants to chime in, this is always good. Like, how would I get like a leader at my company if I'm not a leadership position, right? And I want to get the leaders to jump to to not resist, like to help us invest. And usually that should be easy because the CEO is saying we should do some AI. But like, what's the best arguments that you can make to kind of drive leadership who might be, let's say, not eager or falling behind to kind of jump in? And then vice versa. I find this on my own, like at my own company, like how do you get employees to be more experimental? Like, what have you found to make employees experimental?
Boris, we do have one
Oh, we
question.
do? Oh, I totally missed that.
Yeah, maybe we should tackle that first.
All right. Where is it? You guys tell me. I
Yeah,
literally do not see it.
It's in the Q&A section here. It says, any tips for improving remote onboarding?
That is interesting. I mean, I don't know if I have any good tips there. I think you just got to communicate a lot.
Yeah, I can share. Some of my clients are your big monster tech companies, and they as global organizations with tens of thousands of contractors and new employees every week are definitely tackling this problem. And one of the things that's interesting is the security validations, right? So I know that's an area where imaging technology can provide really good assurances that people pass through an interview process, right? And right now those interview processes are all being handled by a whole series of humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think in the near future that will probably turn into a service that you can purchase that will automate it, similarly to how you do background checks today.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I get this is a good. Let's leave it with this. Let the rapid fire. Like, Luke, what's a cool tool that people should play? Like, in the, did you know? What's one you would throw at people to play with?
Oh, just in general to play with?
Yeah, we got 2 minutes left. Let's give people some.
Gosh, I've maybe instead of a cool tool, that's one of the things I'm most excited about here is because I'm working in the MarTech tech side is the audience generation side, right? And so the ability to kind of recommend or create cluster, like instead of like SQL based, but even clustered
Totally
based audiences. Probably the thing I'm most excited about with AI. As far as tool, like again, generic tools, I'm probably not the right person to ask. Like I'm boring. I just use ChatGPT and play with Claude. Like in general.
Same. I'm
not.
It's really ping ponging between those two most days. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think there's one thing I would recommend. We don't do this enough at our company. In public channels, I see it happen a lot in DMs. But this is a good recommendation to change how we work at Census, but also how everyone should work. Share prompts. Like, I think there's not enough inside a company. This is going back to level 1 and 2. Just like people, it's like once upon a time, people should have learned Excel formulas, right? To go back to my usual analogy, share prompts inside your company. I have discovered that even at the best companies, like there is not nearly enough speed in how people are learning these things. Yeah. And it's because people don't think to share that, right? It's kind of like, why would I share that? That's just
I'm terrible at it.
It's like sharing. Yeah, I know.
So
same. Yeah. And it's like because in your mind, it's like sharing your Google search. Like what? That seems odd, right? but honestly, there is tremendous. Like the best people I see at my company are the ones who not only share, they eagerly acquire like prompts from others and learn. And it's just about using the existing tool better, right? And so to me, like there is a huge variance in level 1, huge. And so if I leave anyone with that, it's like you're almost certainly not at the peak of level 1, and you can be better.
Yeah, and you want everyone across your company to be experimenting,
exactly,
literate and aware of
100%. So that was like my biggest takeaway from our session a couple months ago was like, holy crap, I've been jumping into talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 because it's exciting and fun. Level 1, you can be so much better at level 1, and there's tremendous gains to be had. So thank you both for doing this for a little hour, and hopefully that some people picked up on some of the techniques here, and I'm sure we'll do more of this as we go. Thanks again, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Boris. Thanks, Luke. Nice to talk to you.